In 1650, the respected church historian and the Archbishop, James Ussher of Ireland, announced his meticulously calculated time of the creation. According to his editions, it was early Saturday evening of October 22nd, 4004 BCE. Ussher, of course, was assuming that the Bible was a word-for-word document written by the Lord Jehovah himself, so the bishop had counted every year mentioned in the collection of stories, collection of patriotic histories, the letters, the prophecies, all that are now part of a collection of documents called the Bible. The date Ussher proclaimed was so widely accepted that it was immortalized in the margins of countless Bibles for nearly 300 years. For some Christians, Ussher's date of the creation still remains a fact of God. Other Christians abandoned this calculation after Charles Darwin published his theories of natural selection in 1859. There are some followers of Jesus who have come to see that the Bible is not really a proof text. It's not a single document. It's a complicated collection of writings. And many of these people that have these views are dedicated Christians and scholars also of the Bible. Many scholars have realized for over 200 years that the New Testament wasn't even the New Testament, just the New Testament itself. It wasn't even the first stories, the first Gospels weren't written until at least half a century after Jesus was murdered by the Roman Empire. And in actually reading the Bible, I found each Gospel has very widely conflicting dates, conflicting tales of the events, even the quotes of Jesus and other people conflict. And of course, if you read widely about the Bible and Bible stories about Jesus, you might have found already there are more than just the four in the Bible, the four gospel stories, the four stories about Jesus. There are 36 or so other gospel stories that many of them discovered recently. The Roman Empire just tried to destroy all of those, but they failed. The complicated history of the Bible. It's interesting, and it can be a threat to the beliefs of many Christians. Now, I grew up Unitarian Universalist, and the congregation I grew up in had a church school, just as our noisy and loving church school has kids in it downstairs. When I was in church school, I learned the scientific method. We got that to church school because many of the people in the congregation I grew up in, they were atheists, and they found their spirits nurtured by nature, the world around us. For them, the scientific method was just this beautiful, wonderful way of learning and knowing about the world. The second reason they taught the scientific method is because we weren't going to get it in school. It was a Christian-dominated public school system, and that was not something that they wanted taught. And the third reason was, and perhaps the most important for today, many of those people who were raising me as a Unitarian Universalist, many of them had fled Christianity. They fled a childhood of Christianity and still had memories of profoundly painful experiences growing up in it. For some of them, their memories were so painful that if the minister stood in the pulpit and said the word God, or said the word Jesus especially, they might actually demand the minister be fired. So I didn't learn about the Bible in Sunday school. But, I'd be on the playground with my friends in regular elementary school or junior high school in those days. And we'd have these conversations about religion, about the Bible, about it being the Word of God. So I thought, well, I'm going to read this Bible that my classmates are talking about and see what's going on with this. So I opened one day and I took we had this big giant family Bible. It was an old pulpit Bible, actually. So it was like a half a foot thick and about a foot by a foot in dimension. And I got it down and I opened it up. And the first leaf of the Bible was this picture of the white-haired old white guy in these big robes. I later learned they were like shepherd robes. And he was like tossing thunderbolts at unbelievers and pointing his finger and doing all this fierce stuff. I'm looking at that and thinking, wow, that's really interesting. Didn't know anything about shepherding, so much less guys in the sky. So I started to read, and there was the story of Adam and Eve, and I'd heard that story. And the story of Noah, and I'd heard of that story. And then as I'm reading some of the other stories, the other Old Testament books, a lot of them would begin with like pages and pages and pages of who begat, who begat, who begat, who begat. It would go on for pages, and I'm thinking, why do I need to know this? And what does this do about it? What does this have to do with living a good life? I couldn't figure it out. It was mind-numbing, especially for a kid. Then I got to the story of Abraham and Isaac. And if you don't know that story, God commands a dad named Abraham to take his son, his only child, Isaac, to an altar and kill his son, to sacrifice him. And I'm reading that, and the first thing I thought of when I'm reading this is like, okay, I'm told that this is the Word of God and we're supposed to follow this book. What are my friends doing in their churches? I was also confused because if this was a book that had all of the things, the lessons for how we were supposed to know how to live, I couldn't quite understand. There was nothing about cars. There was nothing about space travel, the telephone, nuclear weapons, which bugged the heck out of me and still do. This seemed to me that there were some fatal flaws in this big giant book. It was supposed to be a God-given manual for truth, and it made no sense to me, especially the big ads. Couldn't get that. As I got older, and I got to realizing, well, when this was written, it was supposed to have been written a long ago, but wait a minute, it was written in Hebrew, it was written in Aramaic, it was written in Koine Greek, and then it was translated from the Hebrew into Latin, and then it was translated from the Latin into English. I didn't know what to do with all of that. So who translates and who decides if it's the one word of God, how do you get all of this translated? And still have it be the actual one true truth. I couldn't make sense to me. I knew enough about translating it. And then I got to thinking, wait a minute, this God is all powerful. What the heck do we need a book for? Couldn't we just have a TV channel, turn it on, and have the lesson of the day right from the heavens? Now, okay, this is the journey of a kid, so I'm not trying to make fun of other folks' religion, because I wouldn't feel good about myself if I did that. This was my experience, though, as I was told, you need to believe. Growing up Unitarian Universalist was a wonderful experience for me. I was an atheist kid. I felt right at home in that. And growing up Unitarian Universalist gave me the best things that I still love about myself, I cherish about myself. And you might hear the kids downstairs, and I was like that, but maybe a little noisier, and sometimes I might even be running around in the sanctuary when I wasn't supposed to. I love church. They were good to me. Christianity is still a sensitive topic in some Unitarian Universalist congregations. I continue to meet folks who have experienced a Christianity where they have been yelled at for asking a difficult question, literally yelled at by a clergyman. It's almost always a clergyman. They've been punished. They've been shamed for doubting that the Bible was this instruction manual leading to a truth. So I feel this call, this sense of I could really make a difference in the world by becoming a Unitarian Universalist minister. So I go my first year of theological school. I'm an atheist, and I begin taking these classes, taking a class on the Bible, and finding out that it's not a manual, was never meant to be an instruction manual from beginning to end. And that really just blew my mind. But then it really was disturbing to me because I met feminists who were Catholics. I thought, why would a feminist stay in the Catholic Church with all that male hierarchy? I couldn't understand it. And I would talk with them about that, and they'd be very passionate about their church, and about the history of their congregation, about the justice work it could do. And I thought, wow, if these women, these strong, thoughtful, caring women can do that, wow. What I thought about Christianity doesn't seem right. And then I met passionate Christians, a couple of passionate Christians who were atheists, openly atheists. Now that changed everything for me. Spirituality has never been a simple thing for me since that day. So the Bible for these atheists was a library, which is really what it is. It's a collection of writings from ancient Judaism, some of the stories and most ancient stories in the first book actually predate even Judaism. And in the New Testament, Jesus, a Jew, a rabbi. I didn't know that until I was in theological school. And he was preaching some pretty challenging stuff. In fact, preaching a lot of stuff that reminded me of what I learned as a humanist kid growing up. Think for yourselves. Do unto others as you want them to do to you. Don't hurt people, you know. Just creating community and doing it in a sense that there's love for one another and that we're doing justice in the world. I learned all of this as a humanist atheist kid. And I'm reading this Jesus and I thought, who the heck was the Jesus my school chums were talking about 20 years before? There's an Episcopalian bishop. His name's Bishop John Shelby Spong. He's the author of nearly 20 books. One book is titled Jesus for the Non-Religious. Bishop Spong considers himself a dedicated Christian. He is, in fact, a small U Unitarian, and he's also a small U Universalist. So he's not a Unitarian Universalist, as we are, many of us here are. He's a Unitarian in the small U sense that he believes that there's just this one God that unifies everything and anything. He's a small U Universalist in that nothing goes to an eternal damnation. Everything is brought back to the beauty and oneness that is this amazing universe. I always wondered, for a while I wondered, why isn't Bishop Spong a Unitarian Universalist? Two big U's, and I actually asked him about it once, and he said, well, I don't think my dedication to Christianity would be very welcome among many of your congregations. And I knew he was right. That makes me sad. It reminds me that we Unitarian Universalists are like humans everywhere. We have sometimes our moments of irrational intolerance. So in his book, Jesus for the Non-Religious, Bishop Spong writes that he is not a theist, but he believes in God. Now, Spong writes carefully at this point that atheism literally means not believing in theism. So technically, yes, Spong is an atheist. He also points out that he does, in fact, believe in God. He just doesn't happen to believe in God like that first leaf in that old family Bible I found, the guy with the ancient sheep herding robes, throwing lightning bolts and wagging his finger at folks. That's not what he believes in. So I started theological school as an atheist. And by the time I came out of theological school, I was still an atheist, but I was also a theist. And I hadn't read or met Bishop Spong yet, so I didn't really know what to do with that. I found myself a theist quite unwillingly. In fact, the humanist in me still goes, "Really, Joel? God, seriously? I mean, you can't measure it, you can't verify it with any sort of experiment. What are you doing?" Theist in me just goes, "It's just there. It's just there. I'm not going to try and defend it with you." So then I discovered Bishop Spong's books, and it was a huge relief to me that a scholar, and a pretty traditional Christian in many ways, had beliefs very much like mine. I came from the atheist side, he came from the theist side. And you know, one of the wonderful things about that experience is that I got to keep this home, this place that's been so important to me in my life, that gave me so much of what I cherish about myself. My beliefs changed, and my home was still my home. Now, as you listen, I can imagine one of the people sitting here among you, coming from the congregation I grew up in now many years ago, and thinking, "Are you trying to convince me that I need to be a theist?" No, I would never do that. You raised me with too much respect for others. Ever want to say, "You need to believe this way or you need to believe that way." It's against my religion to tell you have to believe in God. It's also against my religion to tell any of you that you can't believe in God. I want to ask you this then. Believe well. You have beliefs, whether you like it or not. My experience. Use your beliefs to do good in the world. Bless the world. Love others. Bring justice to the world. Another writer, Karen Armstrong, who writes a lot about religion, religious experience, the history of religions, as well as Christianity. She writes about her own understanding of religion and spirituality. She writes, "Religion is not about believing things. Religion is about what you do. It's an ethical alchemy. Religion is about behaving in a way that changes you. It gives you intimations of holiness, intimations of sacredness." Now, I love to read a wide range of spiritual writings, and heck, I grew up a humanist and an atheist, and I saw some books that had come out 10, 15 years ago now. A group of writers known as the New Atheists were writing a lot about atheism. I thought, "Oh, I want to read about that. That's interesting to me." And there was fellows like Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens writing about atheism. Except that I was pretty disappointed when I hit the books because they weren't really writing so much about atheism as they were writing about what's wrong with theism or Christianity or other religions. And it felt hard to read their words describing someone like me, both theist and atheist, and describing me literally as an idiot. And it was really frustrating because they never seemed to understand or even pay any attention to Bishop Spong's definition of atheism or theism. In fact, I have to say as an aside, as I grew up a humanist, I always liked the idea that you define your terms is really important to me. So neither Harris nor Hitchens ever define their terms. They just fling these terms, atheism, God, everything like that, and never define them at all, which, as somebody who was raised by humanists and atheists, I find that incredibly sloppy thinking. I'm impatient with that. Some of the new atheists do define atheism, God, and the Bible, and then when they define the terms, they don't define them into anything that looks like what Bishop Spong is writing. They define God as the old guy throwing lightning bolts, wandering around in shepherd robes, and it's a kind of 17th century fundamentalist theology. I don't live in the 17th century. I don't know about you all, but Theism seems to be the belief in a Santa Claus God. The Bible is a rule book, ghost-written by power-hungry men pretending to be caring about others, pretending to be representing the Santa Claus God, which I find a kind of disrespect that I'm not at all comfortable with. Sloppy thinking, disrespect, and no conversation about what they actually believe in. What makes them want to get up in the morning and love life? That's the humanism I grew up in. Look at the flowers. These amazing flowers along the windows. The green outside as spring begins to sprout up. It's amazing. This world is amazing. That's enough many days for me to want to get up and just live what's out there today. Who are these people I get to be with this morning, this Sunday morning? It would be so much more interesting if we could just have, in our culture, a conversation about what the Bible is, who we are, whether we're theist or non-theist, atheist, or none of the above, or all of the above, kind of like myself. Just not to have to define God as the old guy with thunderbolts, not have to declare that, argue whether or not the Bible was some sort of magic recipe book. Not even have to worry about whether the Pope or the Islamic taqlid are somehow magically all-knowing about everything. And not even have to assume that the secular humanist dogma declaring all spirituality to be demented. We just didn't have to go there at all with any of that. Bishop Spong is careful, and yet Christly very clear about his religion. He uses the word God, defining God as best as he can, describing a God beyond mere human description, a mystery that calls us to life, calls us to love each other, calls us to be so much more than we are now. I was especially delighted after I was reading Bishop Spong's works to find another scholar of Christianity, a guy named Lloyd Gearing. He's a professor of religion, and he's a flat-out atheist. No theism at all for him. And he argues that a complete disbelief in God is the best way to reclaim the teachings of Jesus. He describes a Jesus that perhaps many of us could connect with. Gearing looks at Christianity as an atheist, and he asks, well, who is this Jesus? What is this Bible? That's a very interesting, challenging Jesus to me. Who was he? Bishop Spong and Professor Gearing point out Jesus, we don't know about Jesus, who he actually might have been. There's very little, basically nothing, that anyone can say about the actual Jesus. What anybody can know are simply these narrow facts. Someone named Jesus had a profound effect on many, many first century Jews. And according to the Roman Empire, they had to kill this guy named Jesus for an act of sedition. It's about all we know. So the enigma, the person of Jesus, is this enigma. But then there are all these images that come together from Judaism in this fascinating way. There's the stories about Jesus called the Gospels. And then there's some letters written by a guy named Paul, who started spreading Christianity beyond Judaism, spreading it to the pagan folks who lived in the Roman Empire. What's clear in all of these ancient books is that the writers did not intend to provide a literal description of Jesus, probably because they couldn't. None of them ever met him. Not even Paul, as he wrote all his letters. But many thoughtful scholars, Armstrong, Gearing, Spong among them, they still read this powerful spirit in the words, the stories told about Jesus, in the letters, writing about Jesus 50 years after he was executed even. In spite of the fact that no one took notes while Jesus was actually alive and teaching, in spite of the fact that none of the Bible's writers knew or ever met the actual Jesus, 50 or even 100 years later, there's this voice that pops out of these writings, a presence. And somehow this led to the founding of a major world religion. Out of this collection of writings, a library with lots of ancient Jewish writings, and a library of what are now considered Christian writings. And this voice pops out of those writings and comes alive for people. Even somebody like Professor Gearing, an atheist. And as I mentioned earlier, this is not the Jesus I expected to find. This guy wandering among the people of his land, healing them, comforting the fearful, twisting back the evil propaganda of the Roman Empire. It's interesting that when I'm reading about Jesus, I'm actually like Professor Gearing. I prefer Jesus as an atheist rather than as a theist. I have no idea really why that is. I keep trying to figure that out because that's my job. I'm a minister, but I really haven't gotten there yet. I just know that I'm reading Jesus, and I do it as Professor Gearing does. I think about him out there, putting his life on the line, comforting children and the poor, speaking for justice, subverting the imperial propaganda of the Roman Empire. I find so much spirit in that I find myself very strongly agreeing with the atheist author Kurt Vonnegut. Vonnegut said, "So much of what Jesus said is absolutely beautiful. What does it matter if he was a god or not?" When Christianity became the official state religion of the Roman Empire, the Caesar sent out centurions to burn all of the copies of unapproved Gospels. One of those Gospels was the Gospel of Thomas. A copy of that Gospel was rediscovered 50 years ago. One of my favorite sayings out of that Gospel is this one. Someone in the crowd asks Jesus, "Tell us what heaven's imperial rule is like." Jesus says to them, "It's like a mustard seed. It's the smallest of all seeds, but when it falls on prepared soil, it produces a large plant and becomes a shelter for birds of the sky." That's a Jesus that makes sense to me. A Jesus who encourages us to be impatient with greed, with lies, but encourages us to ask difficult questions, to be profoundly kind to one another. Jesus even preaches a phrase that sounds so much like the humanism I was raised with. One who seeks will find, and for one who knocks, the door will be opened. I haven't found all of the answers about how I can possibly be an atheist and a theist at the same time. Part of my journey. I'm glad I get to stay here with you and share that journey with you, share your journeys as well. I hope we can be like this ancient rabbi, a people who welcome questions, who welcome kindness, who will take great risks for justice. Let us welcome each other into life. Let's wander this beautiful world together and bless it.
Join us for worship every Sunday at 10 a.m. at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua, a welcoming congregation. We are located at 3024 Cooley Road, 4 miles west of South Main Street, Canandaigua, just north of the intersection with Routes 5 and 20. Look for the blue signs just before the turn. Your comments about this program or questions about the church are welcome at 585-396-1370 or at our website, www.canandaiguauu.org. Producer and editor, Daniel Brigham.